feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Chasing the Pennant podcast. Tonight, I will be your host, Biscuit, joined by the ever so wonderful Sean New. Sean, the Eagles won today, didn't they?
Yeah, that was an interesting game. I didn't want to get into that whole franchise, but they did some interesting things today. They did some, I have my opinions on Doug Peterson, but to save everybody some time, they won today. They look good. Jalen Hurts looked good. It was encouraging for the future, but God damn it, if they win the division, I'm going to be pretty upset.
Amen to that. I was listening. We were coming up from Philadelphia back to Pottstown, and we were listening in, and it sounded like Jalen Hurts had a pretty decent game. And I'm not too much of a football guy, but it was pretty nice to listen to some positive Eagles news for once.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while, but yeah, Jalen Hurts played well, and I'd like to see him finish out the season. I'm sure he will, but I'm a ride or die Carson fan. You can't get me off the Wentz wagon, and I mean the future to me is bleak for the Eagles, but that's a topic for another day.
Yes, another Philadelphia team that is struggling and giving their fans nothing but agony. Well, a little less agony for the Philadelphia Phillies over the last week with the big announcement that the Phillies hired a new president of baseball ops in Dave Dombrowski. The deal is for 4 years and $20 million. Previously with the Boston Red Sox, Miami Marlins, then Florida Marlins, the Detroit Tigers, did some time with the Chicago White Sox and the Montreal Expos. Pretty interesting hire. Definitely came out of nowhere. Dombrowski was originally linked to the Phillies back in, I believe it was October, and seemed kind of throughout the October and November that he was really committed to his project in Nashville, trying to do an expansion team. So it seemed like he was out of the mix. The three big names were obviously Thad Levine, who was with the Twins, Josh Burns from the Dodgers, and Michael Hill, who was recently with the Miami Marlins. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, Thad Levine backed out, Josh Burns backed out, and it kind of seemed down to Michael Hill, and it seemed like he was going to be the guy the Phillies ended up with. But on Thursday afternoon, I think it was Shane who reached out to us in our group chat, letting us know that the Phillies were on the verge of hiring Dave Dombrowski as the new president. Sean, give it to me. What were your initial thoughts on that?
So initially I was a bit disappointed. My first thought was, this guy comes in and tears teams apart. And I had heard from, so many different people that, this is not the guy. This is not the guy you want. This is another McPhail. This is another guy that's a dinosaur that doesn't know how to run a team efficiently and for the future. And looking into it now, I'm a lot more optimistic. There's a lot there to be excited about. I mean, the one thing that everybody is afraid of hearing about this guy is he won a World Series 2 years ago. He won a World Series. He led a team to a World Series 2 years ago. And everybody says he tore that team apart. Look at what the Red Sox did last year. He made big trades. He signed guys. They traded away Mookie Betts. They did a whole lot wrong in the 11 months following the World Series win that caused him to get fired. But in my eyes, I'm a lot more optimistic about it now. There's a lot of positive things to look at. You want to hate the Phillies the second they make a move like this, but it did come out of nowhere. I was looking forward to getting a new name, getting an up-and-comer that, is going to take this team in a whole nother direction. But I am optimistic on it, and I'll touch a little bit more on some of the topics in a little bit.
Yeah, I hear you. So kind of out the gate when the news broke, a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of fans were upset that a newer school guy wasn't in the mix for the job or going to get the job. A lot of people would have preferred someone like Thad Levine or Michael Hill or Josh Burns. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Thad Levine and Josh Burns were out of the race recently. But Michael Hill, I think, would have been a fine move. Really want to know why he ended up not getting the job. But, yeah, the news broke that Dombrowski was in. Like I said, some people were happy, some people were mad. I think the biggest thing is you could see, especially from what John Middleton talked about earlier when they fired Matt Klentak, talking about this team needing to be better at drafting and developing talent to building a sustainable team. And that's why I think the move really was so puzzling, going up, ending with Dombrowski. But what do you think about this, Sean? Maybe the time to really build a long-term sustainable winning team with the Phillies, that window is gone. They have a top-heavy roster where they really could, if they, poured the resources in and decided to spend a little bit more, they theoretically could compete to being a decent enough team to make it to the playoffs and maybe even make a run at the division. Who knows what they'll do when they get into the playoffs? But it's there. They have a lot of talent on the roster. That can't be denied. What do you think John Middleton said? You know what? The window's gone to make a sustainable team that's going to mirror something like the Dodgers, the Indians, the Braves, the Reds. What if this is going to be the Phillies, the rebuild that the Phillies finally do, not trying to mirror another organization, but do their own thing, where if they spend the money and they put the resources in the right people and they have the right guy running the ship, and they win for a couple years, don't you think that becomes much more, appeasing to this fan base with the hire they made with Dombrowski?
Well, in my opinion on all that stuff, here's how I think John Middleton went about that. I think drafting and development is one of the biggest things that, he wants to focus on this offseason, especially with, how kind of poorly Klentak and the whole front office has been on it the last couple of years. My thought process behind this is, he was looking to fill two positions, a GM and a president. And I think his thought process is right now he was looking for a president. And I think he went for, those new guys, the guys with the Dodgers and the Twins that all backed out. And I think instead of, I think he wanted those guys. Those were his first choices. Those are smart members that'll bring a sustainable system to the Philadelphia Phillies. I think his thought process behind this is go get the guy with the experience. Go get the guy that is a proven winner. I know we hate saying that because he's also a proven loser. Go get that guy that knows how to build a winner right here, right now. And because you have two positions to fill, two major positions, have him help you pick out a young guy coming up and have that guy be the one to draft and develop and really pay attention. Have, Dombrowski take care of the major league level. What he said in the presser that we're going to talk about, a quote like retooling, not rebuilding. Like you said, the window's closing. So have him retool the roster right now and bring in some young guy. I don't have any names off the top of my head, but, bring in somebody that can revamp a minor league system or a, draft ideal and split the responsibility, split the tasks, have it be a much more fluid system. Have it be, one person, Dombrowski, takes care of the major league level. He can deal the prospects all he wants because really the Phillies don't have a lot. And have him hire a GM that'll get him the prospects to work with or bring up. Dombrowski's not just going to trade everybody away. He knows when and when not to trade guys away. So in my opinion, I think that's what Middleton was going for here. I think he wanted to get the guy with the experience first and then have him bring in a guy to do the rest of the test that he hasn't really been great with in his time.
Yeah, if that's the route Dombrowski went, I would be really happy about that. The thing is, at 64 years old, the guy's been in the industry for well over 30, 40 years. He's never done anything like that before. If you look at, the Miami Marlins, the Tigers, and now the Red Sox, they do kind of all really take a steep, swan dive off a cliff after he's done with the team. Sure, they win, and winning's great. And, everyone loves when the team wins. Like, it's what baseball is all about. At the end of the day, all of those teams, like look at the Detroit Tigers, they're still recovering over the Dombrowski era down over there in Detroit, I should say. They still have Miguel Cabrera on the books for like another, I think, 2 or 3 seasons. It just hasn't been great. But at the time when they were winning, you don't think of down the road. You think of the moment and you think of the excitement and the fun around the team. Do you think, my question for you, Sean, do you think if let's say the Phillies don't win a World Series. Obviously, I think the answer is yes if they do end up winning a World Series. But let's say, between maybe not 2021, but from 2022 to let's say 2027, 2028, they go on like a 5 or 6 run where at their top of the division, make some noise in the playoffs, have a good solid year. Bryce Harper solidifies himself as a former, a future Hall of Famer, maybe wins another MVP. Everyone kind of takes a step forward, and it's a good run. It's a fun run for this team. Do you think if, let's say, we go on that stretch for the next 5 or 6 years, and then immediately after we have to go into another rebuild that's probably going to be just as arduous as the one we're still kind of currently going through, do you think it becomes worth it at that point?
I think obviously the goal is a World Series, and you can look at, there's been a lot of talk in the baseball world for whatever reason about whether or not the final goal is really winning a World Series. It is. You want to win a World Series. But if you go through a stretch like we went through, say you're talking about a stretch from like 2009 to like 2012 where they were there, they made a World Series run, they made noise in the playoffs, they were still 1 or 2 games away from making a deeper run than they did. I would still consider that a success. A World Series or a National League Championship Series appearance, a Bryce Harper turning around and becoming, an MVP, not trading away the entire prospect pool and having another Sixto Sanchez, experience, but making the right moves to retool this roster. If we end up trading for like Lindor this year and we extend him through 2026, 7, 8, whatever, I would already consider the Dombrowski signing a success right then and there, as long as he doesn't give up, a Bohm or really a McAble. To me, yes, to me that would be worth it. Even if we don't win the World Series, which I do think we are able to do, especially under Dombrowski, it would still be worth it in that sense.
Yeah, I hear you. So, on Friday, Dombrowski was introduced to the Philadelphia press. A lot of different things were discussed. First and foremost, you brought up a comment earlier. We're going to start with that one because off the bat, that's one of the first things he talked about, that him coming to Philadelphia is a retool, not a rebuild. That tells me a few things. That tells me that John Middleton is still keen on winning. That is still his current plan right now. I don't think you make the Dombrowski hire unless you know that you're going to try building a winner and contending. But it also makes me feel like they might take 2021 off. Do you think that's a smart idea? And do you really think that, wasting another year of everyone's prime when you're kind of, even though the Phillies still have a handful of holes to fill, you're only a bullpen away from really winning if you look what happened in 2020. So if you think of a few more bounce back seasons from guys, a full season for, not a 60-game season, 162 games, do you think taking off 2021, using that time to retool, is it worth it? Would you waste Bryce Harper's prime like that?
Well, I the way I see that comment is when he's talking about a retool, he's talking about winning with the current team. He's not talking about taking 2021 off. At least in my eyes, that's how I perceive that. I perceive him saying retool as he's going to re-sign JT. He's going to make a deal like I wouldn't necessarily say a Lindor trade, but he's going to make a deal for a starting pitcher to be a number 3 or a 4 or a 5. He might make that big Lindor splash. We might end up getting somebody like Arenado. I mean, that's a crazy thought. A Chris Bryant maybe. Like these are players that really weren't in play until a guy like Dave Dombrowski came into the system. And I think in terms of him saying retool, he's talking about, like I said, getting a starting pitcher, getting 7 or 8, position guys set on the field and fixing the bullpen. He's not talking about taking 2021 off. He's talking about putting us in a position to win in 2021. Don't blow up the team. Don't trade Bryce Harper. Don't trade Aaron Nola. Don't trade Zach Wheeler. Build around those guys right here and right now. The roster isn't far off. Like you said, we were a bullpen away really from making a playoff push in a 60-game season. And if that's, we don't trade for Brandon Workman and, in the offseason, instead of going after some of the guys that we went after, if we spread the money out, I love the Zach Wheeler and Didi signings, obviously. But if we spent just a little bit more on some legitimate bullpen pieces so that we didn't have to trade for Brandon Workman, who destroyed our entire season, we're talking about a playoff team. And, I think that's what he means by a retool, is he wants to build around what we have and put a contender out there next season because he knows how to put together a winning roster.
Yeah, and you touched on a handful of things I want to bring up right now. So let's jump to JT Realmuto. A couple things bode well for the Phillies over the last couple days. Obviously, the Dombrowski signing, but the other fact of the matter is that the second best catcher on the free agency market, James McCann, signed with the New York Mets over the weekend for a 4-year, $10 million deal, or 4-year, $40 million year for an annual average value of $10 million. James McCann and JT were definitely the two big catchers on the market. It is a very big drop after those two guys. With the Mets now out of the JT sweepstakes, that was kind of our biggest rival in that regard when it came to signing him. And now I do think it makes the Phillies the favorite again in bringing him back. In Dombrowski's press conference, he mentioned that there is financial flexibility, but things do need to be, there's going to be limitations. Do you think JT fits in those plans? Do you think this the hiring, the Mets signing McCann, do you think it's all good indicators that JT is probably coming back?
100%. And I've had my opinions on JT on this podcast, but as of right now, there are still 3 or 4 teams in on JT. I don't know how serious they are. The Phillies need him the most. I do think signing a 29-year-old catcher to a 6 or 7 year deal will end up being a mistake. But I will say, in terms of the Mets, and I love talking about the Mets with you because I just look at your background and it makes me laugh. And we know how much you hate the Mets. But to me, the James McCann signing is a great move for the Mets. Mm-hmm. It reminds me so much of the Wheeler signing by the Phillies last offseason, where there's the top guys, the top starting pitchers that everybody's looking at. Everybody's talking about, Garrett Cole, Steven Strasburg, where they're going to go. And before those guys even have a chance to drop, and everybody would jump to a safety net of Zach Wheeler where he's going to get overpaid, Phillies jumped on him. They said, screw the top 2 guys. Give us number 3. They obviously saw the upside in him, and it has panned out so far in his first year of the contract. But, you take the safety net out, you get him at a cheaper price than if other teams are bidding for him. And all of a sudden, you're set. It's still a great signing. It's not the top guy, but you're also not overpaying. So I actually really like the move for the Mets. James McCann, 4 years, $40 million is really good, and he's a more than serviceable catcher. He is, a very skilled player. But in my eyes, yes. Getting back to the, I think Mets getting McCann because everybody was so adamant about the Mets being in on JT, and we would have to see him, how many times a season. I think this bodes very well for the Phillies. I do think JT ends up coming back, and I think that's probably Dombrowski's number one idea right now is to get him back. And I think it's going to be funny because I have a feeling that JT is going to want us to prove that we're still serious about winning in the next 5 to 6 years. And I think because of that, in the same sense of us trading for JT when we were trying to sign Bryce, I think Dombrowski might pull off some kind of crazy trade to impress JT to kind of keep him here. That's a little bit of a bold take, but I think he's going to want to try and impress him, and I think it's going to work. I think we're going to end up making a splash in the trade market. We might lose some prospects, but I do think JT comes back because of that.
Yeah, I hear you. Just to jump back to the Mets too, I hate to say anything nice about the Mets, but I'm a fan of the McCann signing too. Look, I think they had bigger fish to fry in the ending. JT would have been great to them, but they're in on George Springer. They're in on Trevor Bauer. They're even in on, my Lord and Savior, Francisco Lindor, too. God, I would be so mad if they pulled that one off. But I think JT kind of became out of their asking price. I do still think JT's probably seeking a pretty hefty deal around the $200 million mark. I don't think he'll get that, obviously. But boy, if that was what Dombrowski did to pull off a blockbuster trade and then go bring back JT, you want to talk about the fans doing a complete 360, because I think so many people were out on this team. If that was the case, it would be a lot of fun. I would be very happy that the excitement was back. But you kind of talked about, JT being one of Dombrowski's main priorities, and that was kind of really how I wanted to wrap this episode up, talking about Dombrowski and what you really think the first move he's going to make. I'll go first. My big prediction is that he's going to bring back JT Realmuto. I think it's going to be a little bit of an overpay, and you probably don't want to pay a catcher into, his mid 30s, but I do think they'll shell out 6 years and 150 million for him.
I think they do that too. I think 6 years, 150 million. Like I said, he's a 29-year-old catcher, and the back 2 to 3 years of that, he's probably going to have to switch to first base. Who knows what the Phillies are going to look like in 3 to 4 years? If we had said 3 to 4 years from now, we'd have JT Realmuto. Whatever. But I do think that happens. I think maybe a little less than 150 million, but I don't know. Everybody's saying like people are saying that Bryson Stott has already arrived in Cleveland. Saying that we probably already have Lindor, the second Dombrowski. I think it was right when the presser ended. People were like, yeah, Bryson Stott has just arrived in Cleveland. But I would love to see that. I'm not huge on Lindor as much as some of the other members of this podcast are, but I would love to see it. I think Chris Bryant is still a very great fit. I can easily see us bringing back Didi, but I have a feeling somebody's going to jump on him soon, being that the shortstop and second base market is pretty it's pretty dry right now. So I don't know. I can't say exactly. I can make up a Lindor trade, and I would give up. I might give up Mick Abel for Lindor if we can lock up Lindor for the next half decade. I have a feeling we would have to sign him to something like a 7 or 8 year contract extension if we were to trade for him. Especially with it being just 1 year, you can't do what you did with JT, where you say you have 2 years and you kind of put it off until it's too late. Lindor would have to be, a trade and sign right away. And if Dombrowski pulls that off, I'm back in on this team. I'll say a lot of bad things about John Middleton, but if Dombrowski can pull this off, I'm back in 100% on this team.
See, I don't even think it would necessarily take McAble to swing a Lindor trade. Definitely Bryson Stott. Maybe somebody kind of on the major league tier. Maybe if you wanted to throw in a guy like Adam Hazley. Maybe if you were willing to move someone like Scott Kingery, Rhys Hoskins. I think that might be a good framework to get the bulk of the deal done. Obviously, with Lindor, it all depends on if they're willing to really shell out the big bucks to extend him. I love Lindor. I think he's a very dynamic player. He kind of gives me Jimmy Rollins vibes with his energy and personality. I think he'd be a lot of fun in Philadelphia. Cleveland would be fools to let him go just because of how great he is for the sport. He's almost like a celebrity in that regard. He's a lot of fun to watch. I would love to have him. I don't think he'll be the first move. I really think in his first year, Dombrowski won't, other than maybe a big free agent signing when it comes to JT, I don't think he's going to make any real big sexy trades just because I think he wants to have a little bit of time in the organization to get to know everything in and out. I don't necessarily – he brought up Mick Abel in the press conference, talked a lot about him and how he was very high on him. So I don't know if he'll be as reluctant or as willing to move him in a big blockbuster. And I think he really wants to get the time to know where the team's at. If he thinks they're really, he mentioned one thing he did say was that no one in the organization believes that they're a player away to winning, that it's, definitely the time to reassess, figure out what you still really need, how you can get it, whether it's going to be attained in free agency or trading, how much is it going to cost you to do. Maybe a move for a controllable reliever who has some upside I could definitely see happening, or maybe going after someone like Liam Hendricks or Brad Hand in the free agency market. Definitely something in those lines I could see happening.
I completely like I do think, and one thing that we really haven't talked about at all, and especially with the Dombrowski stuff and the JT stuff and the shortstop stuff, we really haven't even thought about the bullpen. And I truly believe, and I will stand by this, if we don't get one of, Liam Hendricks or Brad Hand, or I don't even know who's at the top of the free agent market in terms of relief pitchers, but if we don't get a big name in terms of relief pitching, it's a failed offseason. There's no reason right now, especially, and with a guy like Dave Dombrowski, there's no reason that you shouldn't get one of those two guys, especially if John Middleton is as serious about the financial flexibility as he said he is.
Yeah, and I really don't think you need to. The Phillies bullpen was so bad last year, and other than really solidifying some depth within that bullpen, I really think if you make just one or two improvements, maybe get one or two guys outside of the organization right now, that bullpen's going to look completely different in 2021. Hector Neris, I think over 162 has a better season. I think Victor Arano will be back as well. So you're going to get an arm back that you haven't had in a year plus a year or a season or two. Guys like Connor Brogdon showed promise, Jojo Romero. There's definitely guys there who are intriguing enough to think that under a full season, different circumstances, they might have had better years. I think if you really get someone to lock down the late innings, get that elite closer like Brad Hand or Liam Hendricks, with someone like Hector Neris in a setup role, you're looking at two guys who can lock down the late innings of games, which, like I said, that could really be the difference between the Phillies making it into the playoffs in 2021 and winning in that year. So I really think that needs to be the focus, as much as, you have a guy like JT Realmuto, who's going to be obviously the big talk of the offseason. But that bullpen and fixing that's really kind of the underrated move that I think rather, should be focused on that right now. You should be channeling that energy into that rather than, speculating what's happening with JT. So I'm hoping they get one of those guys. And you're right with Dombrowski, it should happen.
And that, honestly, that might be the move that persuades JT to come back. Even if you have to trade for a guy like that, which I don't think they'll do, but I mean, if you tell JT, listen, we want you back, and to prove it, we're going to go get the best closer on the market, and that's Liam Hendricks. And if you go get Liam Hendricks right now, give him whatever the hell he wants because he's an elite level closer, all of a sudden, like, JT's looking at a legitimate bullpen, and it like, you're right. You're 100% right. It only will take one person. We have enough depth on the 40-man roster. We have enough of those young guys that have shown some promise in the majors. And if you put Neris back in that setup role, the bullpen looks completely different. And I think it's going to be a bullpen that JT is going to want to play for. And I think that's going to be a major factor in whether or not he comes back.
Yeah, I hear you. And like I said, it doesn't take many people. It really only, like I said, one or two guys can make a world of difference. But that really wraps up the show here tonight. I did want to get your final thoughts on anything baseball related before we wrapped up, Sean. What do you got for me?
I forgot to get some final thoughts together, but I want to see Middleton put his money where his mouth is. I want to see if he's serious about bringing that effing trophy back. I want to see him, Bryce Harper might have been stupid money for $330 million, but I want to see him talk real stupid money here. And I know he said he lost some, but I want to see him make smart moves, put his money where his mouth is, really mean it. I want to see a smart GM hired soon, and I want to start believing in the Phillies again. I really do. I'm ready. I'm not ready to jump on the Padres or the Rays bandwagon. I want to root for my Philadelphia Phillies.
Amen to that, man. And what would be more beautiful than finally a winning season after what? It's going to be 9 or 10 years. And you talked about stupid money. Just spending money doesn't even need to be stupid. But while we're on the topic of spending money, my final thought, I haven't rode with it in a while just because I haven't recorded in probably a couple months. But sign JT Realmuto. It's time. Bring back the best catcher in baseball. You mentioned it earlier. You have different opinions about JT. There were moments in the seasons, my opinion soured as well, specifically with his bat. And, a good bat, not what I would consider an elite bat, but overall a fantastic player, definitely the best at his position, bar none. And if you want this organization, John Middleton, now I'm directly talking to you. If you want this organization to really come back, you might have had a good first start with Dave Dombrowski. You got your Joe Girardi-esque hire. But now bring back the bee's knees. Give me my JT Realmuto. Give me the best catcher in baseball. But that's going to wrap up the show. Sean, as always, thank you for joining me. To our fellow listeners, I hope you have a great night and take care, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.